You're listening to Learn as You Parent, the podcast that gets real about raising kids. Because let's face it, parenting doesn't come with a manual. I'm your host, Sarah Beth. Let's dive in.
So today we're so excited because we are going to talk about screen time, the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything screen with early childhood development. And, are they good? Is there any good to them? Or is it just a bad idea all around? And luckily, we're not here alone. We have Dr. Sarah Kucker with us today. Dr. Sarah Kucker is an assistant professor at Southern Methodist University, right here in Dallas. And she knows all about early childhood development, all about language development, and she's done extensive research on screens with children. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Sarah Kucker.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here. It's an exciting opportunity to share a little bit about the work we're doing and talk with real parents.
Yes, and I'm definitely a real parent. No, there is nothing perfect about me by any means. So I have two children. We have Elizabeth, I call her Zaza sometimes. She's 4 now. And we also have Charlie, who is almost 2 now. And Charlie actually got to participate in one of your studies. And what was really funny about that is actually I was driving, and when I was in the car on my way, first of all, I had him in a really cute outfit because, of course, he was going to participate in a research study that was going to be videoed. All of a sudden, I hear him coughing and hacking in the back, and I didn't know what to do. And I couldn't pull over very easily. But then I heard him crying, and I thought, okay, well, at least he's crying. That means he's getting air. And then I got to Southern Methodist University, and I opened the door, and lo and behold, Charlie had yacked everywhere. Yeah, like it was complete deer in headlights. I had no idea what to do. I was like, I have no clothes.
And I had no clothes.
No clothes. So, new update. I had that cute outfit, and he doesn't typically get car sick or anything, so I just didn't have a backup. And so I've never met you before, and I am walking in with my baby. That it was an experience, you could say.
It was a good start.
A bonding moment.
Yes,
we had a nice bonding moment, and you immediately took me to the bathroom, and we got him all washed and everything, and then he just had a new fresh diaper for him to go and do the study. But he was I did have a sweater for him to change into for the top, because it was a little cold that day, so he did wear the sweater, but it was like business on top, nothing on the bottom, complete Zoom call appropriate attire. But it was totally perfect, so he got to participate in a fun study with y'all
with no pants on.
So that was awesome. I would love to ask you so tell me about this kids lab, and it's called the SMU Kids Lab. Mm-hmm. How did it get started, and what are y'all doing right now?
Yeah. So it's SMU Kids Lab. Kids stands for Kids in Development, because we study children development, mostly young children, but really development across the lifespan. And we actually got started sort of years ago in a different form. So I was faculty at Oklahoma State and then up in Wisconsin for a couple of years. And that's when I really started growing my research lab. And our goal really is to better understand early development and do research to figure out what supports and what hurts development. So just like a school teacher might figure out a lesson that works better and not do the lessons that don't work, mm-hmm. or a doctor prescribes a medication that actually works and not one that doesn't, we try to figure out sort of what kind of activities can we do with children that will actually work to support their development? What kind of things can parents do to support their child's language development? And so I started this work out of grad school, and trying to do multiple different research studies where we have families come in with kids of different backgrounds and different ages from all different walks of life and participate in studies. And it's nothing scary. It's just kind of a play session, as you saw with Charlie. And We give them different toys and see how they respond, and every kid is a little bit different. But through that, we get a lens for sort of what's typical and what's not, and get a better sense for what can help kids and what may not help kids. And so currently at SMU, we're really focusing a lot on early language development with a focus on digital media and technology, and how that technology in today's day and age, you can't avoid it. It's everywhere. Right. And so really starting to focus on, what does that mean?
Yeah.
How as parents can we navigate this? What should we do with our kids to make sure they're still learning and not getting too distracted? Or is there ways that this technology can help? And so we've really structured a lot of our research around that. And young age, we also do some stuff with elementary, and we actually have a high school study now, also are studying the same.
Oh, wow.
Along the same lines of
so
development.
All ages.
Yes.
So I know that primarily, at least, you're more focused on this early part. And just to kind of get us kicked off, like you were telling me a little bit earlier about how kids can start language development even before they're born. Is that right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Tell me more. Tell us more.
And we start growing even in the womb, right? So we know it takes 9 months for a baby to develop, but even before birth, the child is starting to develop some abilities. Now it takes a long time. You don't have a fully formed or even a child that's even viable until at least 21 or 22 weeks. But by the time you get to those last few weeks of pregnancy, a lot of the brain is mostly developed. A lot of the senses will be developed. So you have a good sense of hearing even before birth. Taste and smell are actually quite present. Eyesight, not so much. That's the one that will take, actually, you actually need sunlight for your eyes to develop. So you can't develop that in the womb.
Okay.
But that means that the kid can hear language before they're ever born. And when mom is talking, that's sending vibrations down to the womb. And so the baby's hearing some of those sounds from mom, and they're hearing some sounds from the world. Now, they're not hearing fully spoken sentences. It's much more like Charlie Brown speak of like, when you're hearing that, you're also getting the rhythm and you're getting the cadence. And every language has a different cadence. So English has a different cadence than Chinese, for example. Each parent has a slightly different cadence. If you think about like a Southern accent versus a Midwestern or an East Coast, have slightly different. And the kid can start to pick up on that. So even after birth, immediately after birth, they're starting to have some preferences based on what they've heard. So they'll sort of turn and orient towards mother's voice over a stranger's, and they'll orient to whatever language it was they were exposed to more than other languages they were not. And then during that whole first year of life, they're just hearing sounds. No newborn is talking. They're just crying, right? But they're hearing sounds, and they're hearing language from the world around them. And that's helping them hone what will be their vocabulary. So they're starting to learn, if you're an English speaker, that a, e, ba, da, la, ma, bu, those are all English sounds, but is not.
Right.
But if you speak the African click language, that is a relevant sound. Or there's, in like Spanish, there's a double R where you roll your tongue. And then there's a regular R. So if you're a Spanish speaker,
French too.
Yeah, you start to learn that those are two different sounds. But in English, there's only one R.
Right.
And by the time kids are about 1, they're not talking yet, but they've picked up enough, they've heard enough sounds in their environment that they start to hone in on the sounds that they're exposed to and sort of ignore the ones that they haven't heard. And that's the start of language. And then over the next year, they're starting to then produce those themselves and put them together and say words, say sentences, and grow their vocabulary. So it starts really, really early. But then over those first couple of years, they're really putting all the pieces together and starting to pick up patterns from the environment. And so being exposed to language is a really, really important thing during those first few years, because that's where they're going to get that information to build their language.
One thing I've heard from doctors and just a few other people is, always narrate what you're doing with your child. Of, we're going to change your diaper now, or, we're walking up the stairs. And so is that true?
Yes.
Should we be doing that?
Yes. It's like the simplest thing you can do to really support child's language is just narrate what you're doing and just talk. And they're not going to talk back, especially if you've got just a 1-year-old or 1.5-year-old. They're just going to play there and look at you if you say something. But they're starting to learn, and they're hearing that, and they're picking that up. And even deaf infants who might not be hearing are seeing the signs. So they're seeing and they're picking up the patterns.
Interesting.
And they're starting to learn, even if they're not talking back, they're starting to learn the back and forth of language. So as a parent, you might go, look at that. And the kid goes, ah. And then the parent's like, yeah, I know. And the kid goes, oh. And they're learning that you take turns. And so they're learning that synchrony. So even if they're not talking, that narrating, that talking to them can be really beneficial.
And one thing, when I think about narrating, I think, oh, should I say up the stairs, up, up? Or do I say we're walking up the stairs? Or is there a certain word you focus on as you're doing it? Can you speak to any of that? Or
variety
just
is good.
Variety.
Yeah, a variety of things. So, if you're only telling your kids, stop, don't do that, stop, don't do that, they're not going to learn very much. But if you're like, now stop doing that, that's not healthy, or we can't do that here, you're giving them more information. And so exposure to some of the grammar is good, but repetition is also good too, because we don't learn in one instance. As adults, we don't learn in one instance either. So for kids, repetition can be really positive. Reading the book more than once can be really helpful. But then vary it up a little bit. Add some extra questions in there as you're reading the book, or like going up, up, up the stairs. Ooh, gotta up one more, and throw in some variability. And that's what we sort of say is high quality language is language that's variable, that is sort of relevant, and is in real time, back and forth.
Okay.
And that real time conversation. And I think this isn't exactly what you asked, but I think another important thing is that baby talk is not bad for kids. So when you are talking to kids, sometimes there's a misconception that I should be speaking in adult speak to help them learn language and learn how grammar works. And I need to say adult sentences. And for really young kids, the first 1 to 2 years, they don't even know what grammar is. They don't even know what the sounds of their language are. And baby talk can actually be really helpful for them learning those sounds. So when you're like, looky, a blankie, here's your kitty, you're enunciating and you're emphasizing the vowel and you're emphasizing the parts of the word. And that's helping that child attune and be like, oh, that's an important sound. Or that's an important word. And it helps them learn the sounds, and then also helps them actually segment the words, because we go E at the end of a word. So like, looky, a blankie. And so that can help them learn. Now, if your kid is 5 talking in baby talk all the time, probably not helpful, but during those first few years, baby talk can actually be beneficial. Now, if you're not someone who talks in baby talk, don't worry. Kid's going to grow up. It's fine. But don't think you have to avoid it by any means.
I actually thought I had to avoid it. So I guess...
it can be that's very especially in the first year or two. And again, some people just aren't baby talk people. And that is also okay. The children's still going to get rich input from normal talk. But don't be afraid if you're like, oh, that's okay.
Okay. What is so is it true that the first few words are like mama and then dada, and then what are the first common 5 words or so for a child?
They tend to be high frequency words. So words that they hear a lot. And so mama, dada, water, bottle, ball, cat, dog, whatever. These early and single syllable words as well. That are physically easy to say. So if you think about mama and dada, all they require you to do is go ah, ma, and flap your jaw up and down. And so it's physically easy to say. So kids can stumble onto that relatively easy. There is a parent perception side of it too.
Where it is 3 months and it's already saying mama.
Exactly. Where parents are like, oh, well, they said mama. Well, maybe the kid was just babbling and having to go, ah, mama. And then the mom got, but when mom gets really excited, it was like, you said mama. The kid's going to go, ah, and mimic that and try to do it again. So that can be really enforcing for the child to go back and forth. So some of it is the parent thinking that's what they heard. And there's some other studies that have different cultures, have different ideas about what a child's first word should be. Actually, is evidence that higher frequency. So if a kid hears, if some kid would have just hear like la 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 all day long, that's probably the first word they'll say. Because they're getting lots of exposure to it, and they're getting reinforced. So every time the kid goes ah la la, someone's going yay, and they'll do it again.
Okay. So one other thing that I thought was interesting that I didn't know is that if the kid's mispronouncing the word, it still counts as a word.
Yes.
Like if they're not saying cookie, they say kuh or something, but they always say that when they're, or maybe banana might be a better word because most kids can't say banana, but like if they say nana, then that counts as a word. Oh, you know that word. And I thought, well, if you're not saying banana, so
it doesn't count. Yeah. If they're using whatever their sound for it is, if they're using it in the correct context, it counts. Well, because that tells us it's in their head.
Yeah.
They understand it. If they're, whatever that sound is, if they're using it consistently, We count it
Okay.
as part of their language. And as they get older, they'll learn the correct pronunciation or to say the whole thing. But yeah.
Let's enjoy the really cute stage when they don't know all the, the perfect pronunciation. You got to enjoy the stage while we have it.
Yeah, give them credit for that knowledge then.
Yeah, get all the videos you can. So now when we think about language development, and then we also think about screens, that is, obviously screens are inevitable. And I know that with anything that you say you can't have with a child, obviously they want more. Carly is like a dog with a bone when he gets that remote control. And by the way, it cannot be a pretend remote control because they know the difference. So he wants a real one that really works on the TV. So he likes to touch it and make sure that the Apple TV is working. I'd love to know a little bit more about screens, early childhood, 0 to 1, 1 to 2, or what are the parameters of, hey, this is something that's good, or hey, is this something that's bad? I guess first off, is there any good to it, any of it?
There can be some good. And I'm sort of coming from this as a very realistic perspective of like, we all have phones, we all have computers, we have screens in our cars. So to even get anywhere, kids are going to be exposed to them. And there are some really functional uses of those screens. We use GPS all the time to get to where we're going and to get there on an appropriate time, right? To get the kid to daycare on time, right? And those sort of passive exposures are not going to be harmful to the child. They're not being enraptured by it. It's not distracting. I mean, it may be distracting, but almost momentarily. But we also use screens a lot for video chat and to FaceTime with other people. That is actually a really beneficial use of FaceTime because it helps those children connect with someone else on the other end. And they can have a real life conversation with the other person through the screen, but it's a real person and a real talking. And it's in real time back and forth. We talked about that conversation. You can get that through a screen where the kid can go, and then grandma can go, oh yeah, tell me more. And they can go, and it's just almost like they're there in person, but they're little on the screen. And so FaceTime has been shown in multiple studies to be beneficial for bonding and for social relationships. Now, it may not help their language development per se, or it might not help them learn specific content depending on the child's age, but you can get other benefits like
social, emotional,
and getting back and forth and learning conversation, learning the back and forth synchrony, which is an important part of skills. Now, all this is, and I say it sort of depends on the kid's age because children under the age of 3 have a hard time processing information from a digital source. So when they watch a video, even if grandma is showing them something on the screen while they're FaceTiming, if they are watching a TV or on a computer, they can see what's going on. They visually can process that information, but their brain just can't take that information and apply it to the real world. Something we call the transfer deficit. You can't transfer information from 2D sources to a 3D source. Your brain just can't do that. It's not mature enough until we get to be closer to 3. And so kids really can't learn new information. Like they can't really learn new words from a tablet or from a computer or from a video, but they might get other things like the social emotional skills, this connection with grandma, or there might be times where like, I need 5 minutes for my own sanity. So you're going to watch a video for 5 minutes because I'll be able to come back as a better parent in 5 minutes. That's fine. You're not going to ruin that kid's life for 5 minutes on a video, especially if you come back and you supplement with that some really rich playtime. Right. You come back for it. Now, you don't want your kid sitting in front of a screen all day, 8 hours a day. Then they're missing out on all of these real life opportunities. So under 3, there's not a lot that is really positive about screens for kids, but unless it's the case of like video chat, just because they can't process it. Their brain just can't process that information. Over 3, then we can start to think about educational shows and apps and things. But I do believe that there's not like a ultimatum. Like if your kid has 5 minutes of screen time here or there, it's not going to ruin them. They will still thrive as long as they're getting good, rich input and interactions in real life.
So I know some parents that will kind of use screens as like almost a reward or like, oh my gosh, I'm just so stressed. And it's almost like a pacifier in some instances. I think, 5 minutes is one thing, but are there any numbers as far as the length of time?
Yeah, it's hard to give it an exact number because it varies a lot based on each kid. based on what they're actually doing. So if they're spending it on FaceTime, or if they're spending it just watching a video, or if they're watching an educational show versus a kid that's like all over the place and is overstimulated. Yeah. Melon is all over the place. It's overstimulating, and that's really not, but like a Sesame Street, they could watch a little more of that, and it's not going to be this overstimulation that's going to get the kid sort of in trouble later on. So there's not a magic number, because it really depends on the kid, the context, and the circumstances, and sort of how frequent that might be across like a week or a month or something like that. The important thing I like to think about is it's always in moderation, and a parent will know their kid best and know like, okay, I need not just 5 minutes, I need 10 minutes. And so that's what they're going to get right now. And you have coming back and having real rich interaction and playing with real toys, then that kid's still going to have an opportunity to learn a lot of really rich things. And so I always think about it in the broader picture of things. Like, are they getting lots of other rich things? Then some downtime right now might be okay. But you also want to think about broader picture in terms of if the kid is getting the tablet every day for 45 minutes, and then all of a sudden one day you're like, no tablet today. Well, they're going to have a hissy fit, because now they've learned that that's the pattern.
Right.
And so setting some really clear boundaries of like, all right, we're going to put a timer on, and when the timer goes off, we're taking it. Okay, just a reminder, there's 5 minutes left. Tablet's going to be done in 5 minutes. Or having very specific circumstances in which you use it. So you can only use a tablet when you're sitting in this chair. And when we're out of this chair, there's no tablet. So we don't bring it to the kitchen table. We don't take it other places. It's in this spot only. Those can help set boundaries so that when you take it away, you're not going to have that of the kid, and they'll be able to transition to something else as well.
And what are some model behaviors that parents should do? I know one thing we try to do is not have our phones actually at the dinner table when we're eating together. Not always perfect. But then, of course, like if we're cooking, there's, a screen going. And so is there, how do you kind of say, oh, well, it's okay here, but it's not okay here? And is there anything you can speak to that?
Yeah, I think modeling is the best approach. Like if I monkey see, monkey do, keep that in mind. So if we're having a family dinner and I'm pulling out my phone, well, that's telling the kid that phones are allowed at the table. And so if you keep your phone in a certain spot, like, okay, you can only play on your tablet when you're in that chair. Well, mommy's chair is here. And you have certain spots that sort of help model those boundaries. I think one thing to keep in mind too is that when our phones are present and within reach, it actually decreases the amount of talk and interactions we have with our children without us even realizing it. So just having the phone within reach, we go and we check it. Even when we're playing with our kid, we'll glance at it real quick. Or if we can hear it, we'll always have one ear sort of listening for it. And that is actually more disruptive to the child's interaction. And we know from a variety of studies, if you're playing with your kid and teaching them a new word as you're playing, and your phone vibrates and it interrupts just for a few seconds, it interrupts that interaction, the kid learns less.
Oh.
And the parent actually talks less. So it's the presence of the phone that's actually impeding it. So yeah, monkey see, monkey do, model the behavior you want your kid. But keep in mind that when you have your phone and your tablets and things around, it's distracting you too. And you're not being as present. I know I'm guilty of that all the time. Like even when I'm at work, I'm not present on this thing. I'm like, oh, wait, I'm checking my phone over here. And so it's hard. It's hard for us to practice that too. But I think that's something we keep in mind as well, of like, okay, wait, I need to be more mindful about where I'm putting my tablets, and I need to be better about putting it on silent during playtime, things like that. The phones aren't going away. That's part of life. Yeah. It's going to be there. And so just find a way that works for you to be present with your kid. Even if your phone's off to the side. Yeah. Just keep in mind, like, I'm going to focus on this. And train yourself, because that will be a training thing too. That, again, we're all working on it.
Of course. Yeah. We talked a little bit about direct feedback. And is that really like the research that you've done? It's just really picking up on what the child's interested in and speaking to that, and then trying to continue to narrate back and forth?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And again, just being this present in the moment, what the kid is doing. And we naturally do this. This isn't a magic trick. We do this already.
It's a magic.
Yeah. Like we naturally will do this. Like if you and I are talking and I'm sitting here and talking about this, you're going to look down at what we're talking about. And I'm going to look at you to make sure you're focused on it. You're going to look at it. I'm going to look at it. And we have this triangle with the world. We call this joint attention. And that means that we can learn about whatever this mythical thing is we're learning about. We're both focused on it, and we can learn about it, and I can teach you about it, and you can ask questions, and we can go back and forth. That's super beneficial for children's learning. And we already do it naturally in life. When we're holding something, we talk about the things we're holding. Parents already tend to name the things the kids are playing with. when they're focused on them. Kids learn best when they're looking at something and they hear the name as they're looking on it and they're holding it.
And they're holding it.
And they're holding it. We do these things already naturally in life. Parents tend to do them as long as they're sort of present in the moment, right? A parent that's sitting there on their phone isn't going to notice that their kid is holding that toy. And so they're not going to name it. And so that's where it sort of will break down a little bit. But there's not a magic trick. Just talk to your kid, play with them, interact with them in whatever style sort of works for you. And as long as you're giving them input and you're engaging with them, they're going to be learning. So think about it in terms of the rich input.
And I went to one of your talks. It was super interesting. I loved it. I can't wait till your next one. And I think you had said in that triangle that when the child is holding it, it takes up like 80% of their eyesight or something, because basically they have little short little dinosaur T-Rex hands. But when the mom was holding it in the view, it was further away. And it is that right?
Yeah. I call it dinosaur arms.
Okay.
Because kids have short arms. And because they have short arms, when they pick something up, it's not way out here. It's right here. And when it's right here, it's taking up it can take up to 80% of your visual plane. And it's much bigger.
Okay.
So when I'm sitting here and I'm playing with this object and then you happen to name it, it makes it really easy for me to figure out what the name of this thing is. It's like, oh, this must be the shoe because it's the thing right in front of me. That's the only thing I can see because my arms are short. So it blocks everything else out. Whereas for an adult, you hold things out here and you're like, well, there's a shoe and there's this and there's that. And then there's, and it makes it harder to learn because you have lots of options. But for a kid, their short arms helps them. And so when they hear a word, they map it to that thing.
Okay.
And so that physical holding brings it close. The other thing that physical holding does is it turns it around and manipulates it. So then the kid can see it from multiple angles. And that gives them a richer representation of what that thing is. Versus if you're just looking at it far away, you only see it from one angle. You don't know what it feels like. You don't know what it touches. You don't know if it makes a noise.
Right.
But when you hold it, you get rich information. And so you learn about it better too. Physically touching and playing during these social interactions is important.
And I know for the study that Charlie was in, it was so cool. I loved it. It was, you were like a magician under the table. And so there were 3 different objects on a tray, right? And then sometimes in maybe the first section, it was 3 normal objects, like a shoe, like something that the child would see in normal everyday life. And then the second section was something they probably haven't seen in their normal everyday life, and to see if they can pick that out when you name it a certain number of times. Is that right?
Yeah. So we sort of get a baseline. So here's some object like a shoe that the kids should know. And we make sure that they know those things. And then we'll throw some novel objects up. We're like, there's a whiff. Where's the roke? Here's a cheem. And
those are made up words, right?
Yeah, those are totally made up words.
Okay.
Sometimes the kids will look.
I'm going to have to go back to school to become a professor.
Half the times the kids will look like that. They're like, wait, what? What did you just say? And then when they do that, we're like, they know that's not a word. And that tells us something important about they know some things and they know that's not one of those things. So they're already processing it.
Okay.
Other times kids will be like, oh, cool, new, fun, shiny. And they'll pick up that funny thing. And they've never seen it before, but then they're exploring it. Remember how physical manipulation and holding?
Yeah, like,
so that curiosity could be really beneficial for learning. And so by bringing children in and showing them both familiar and novel and giving them familiar words, but then also novel words, we can see how children process these unknown things, how they attend to it, which conditions are best for learning. So if we give them multiple or give them just one, if we repeat the name or if we don't, if we let them figure it out versus if we tell them what it is, we can test which of those situations is sort of the best for learning. So.
And at the end, you did the screen.
Yes.
So let's dive into that a little bit. So we did the first 2 sections that we just talked about. Now we did the screen, which did have some of the objects or maybe similar objects, but that was 2D, right?
Yes.
And so they couldn't pick it up and manipulate it.
Correct.
And so what was the hypothesis, and then what have been your findings?
Yeah, so the screen version on that one is actually looking at an ebook. It's a story and it has little pictures on it. And then in the course of the story, there's toys. So Zoe's having a birthday party and Zoe gets all these funny toys for Zoe's birthday. And so we go through the story and they learn the words. And part of our original hypothesis was like children at Charlie's age are not going to learn because it's a screen and we don't learn from screens very well when we're under the age of 3. But it's also a story, so they're engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So they're focused on it because it's got these fun characters that sort of move. And so and Charlie was like, ooh, very enraptured with it, right? And so we're starting to think about, well, storybooks, like print storybooks, are good for kids.
Right.
They can learn a lot from storybooks, in part because they're social. You can't, usually at 2, you're not reading a book by itself. Mom's reading it with you. Or dad's reading it with you, and you get that social element. And that social element is actually really helpful. You can point to the pictures or ask extra questions. And so now we're trying to test can we do that in an ebook form? Can we have some of those social interactions? So some of the children are watching the book, are reading the ebook with us, and we're just reading the page. Nothing else. We just read the page as it goes. And we don't think that they'll probably learn when we just read it as is, because it's a screen. But then some of the kids will read it and we'll point out stuff as we go, just like a real parent would. And we'll talk to them as they do it. And we hope that they'll be able to learn in those cases, which might be an evidence of a type where you could use the screen as just a prop for having a conversation with your kid. And so the kids can still learn. So we don't have results on that quite yet, but there's some evidence to show that when you make tablets social by using it just as a toy almost, and talking with your kid while you do it, the kid can still be learning because you're highlighting the things that are important. You're repeating them in real life, not just on the screen.
Well, isn't there also something about learning when, like, you're physically turning the page, though, too?
Yeah. So you get like manual dexterity.
Right.
Yes.
And so you can't really do that on a tablet.
No, you can't. So there are some parts of tablets that just are never going to supplement the real world. You don't get the tangible touch of paper. You're not going to get the screen flips. You're not going to get the manual dexterity. And that, I think, is something we need to be aware of when we're doing tech, knowing that there are some things we can't supplement.
Yeah. One thing I had learned whenever I was doing the, reading with Charlie and Zaza was that I actually don't have to read the whole book. I thought, okay, there are words on a page. I have got to read this. Come to find out what, I guess when the child, learn as you parent, it's more about just when they're, I guess it's age appropriate of when they're really small. It's, look at that one item and let's turn the page. And, let's look at, we don't even have to read the story to have the interaction and to learn, because a child's say, attention span isn't necessarily going to hold for like a full story, depending on how many words there are and everything. So, that's fun. Something fun I've learned.
Yep. Don't need to read the pages at all. I even had a parent once who was not a good reader, hated reading, was not a very strong reader. And she would just make it up.
Oh, nice.
She was just like, based on the pictures, she would just make up what the story was. Her kids didn't know, and they actually were very high in vocabulary.
Yeah.
Because you can supplement it however you want.
And sometimes I have been known to just grab a few pages. Like, we got to get through this book.
Kids not going to know.
Not yet. Like, we're definitely on the edge where the kids are going to know.
You read it over and over again.
Yeah, that's true. So I wanted to ask about, like, is there anything surprising? So you've done a ton of studies. You've learned a lot. Is there something that surprised you in your research of, oh, wow, this is really interesting. More parents should know this?
Yeah. I think curiosity and play being so important, and there is no perfect answer. When I started doing this research, I thought that there would be a number of like, oh, this many minutes of tech is okay, and this many is not. Or there's for sure you can do it this way and you're guaranteed. And that's not the case. There's so much variability. Every kid is different. So we've actually started looking at things like temperament and personality, because that directs how the kid navigates the world. Okay. And so I think the most surprising thing I've learned is that there's a wide range of what's normal.
Okay.
And so there is you might see a benchmark. You might see at this age, my kid has to be doing this. Know that age is not a magic number. It's usually a range, and that is the average within that range. And when we say a range is normal, we really mean a range is normal. Because there's a lot of differences. There's cultural differences for when children even start to walk. And
really?
So in the US, actually, we say kids normally are starting to walk about 1 year. Yes. 12 to 13 months or so is probably where we put it. In Cambodia, they walk as early as 9 months. You know why?
No, I don't know.
Because in Cambodia, kids from almost birth balance on their mother's knees or sit on the floor with no aids or sit on a log or sit on a big chair. They don't have these bimbo chairs that kids are sitting in. And parents are not holding them and carrying them around as much. And so their core muscles build up much faster. And so they end up sitting and walking much sooner than children in many Western cultures. Now, as adults, you couldn't tell the difference. We all learned to walk, and we learned fine. So it doesn't really matter that they walked earlier. It's just a factor of the environment that has then shaped the ways that they do it. Where in a lot of cultures, actually in North America, kids start talking earlier because we do a lot more talking to our kids. So they start talking earlier. So there's a lot of variability, and there's not a right or wrong way. A lot of different pathways. And we're going to get to that same end goal as long as you're getting the same input and eventually getting the information that you need and the experiences that you need. And sometimes you get that in really non-obvious ways. If you think about these short arms, it's actually helping kids learn words. That's not something we would have thought the length of a child's arms matters for their word learning. But it does. And so keep an open mind, I like to think. There's a lot of variability. There's lots of different pathways. And every kid is going to be a little bit different. And as long as they're continuing to move forward, make progress, they're learning.
It's interesting that you said that, really those milestones are like really like the average point, because kid number 1 versus kid number 2, it was kid number 1 was, oh my gosh, we're at the 6-month mark and these are the milestones that the CDC says that she needs to be doing. And we would, first of all, like some of them were like, oh gosh, have we seen her smile? Or, whatever the things that you're supposed to have seen, we didn't know. And then, for second kid, of course, it's just, oh, okay, he's eating and drinking today. Good job. Like we're not stressed at all. And I really would, that was one thing I learned is, you need to, I guess there's just like you don't want to be stressed about it, but you also want to be aware if there is something, but you don't want to be stressed. And are the averages, I mean, they're just truly like a midpoint average. So it could be a little bit before, it could be a little bit after. And
so really much a range. And a lot of times pediatricians will be able to tell you sort of what the cutoff for being at risk is. When we're thinking about language and vocabulary, by the time they're 18 months, they should be starting to talk. Somewhere between 20 and 50 words at 18 months tends to be what we say. If they're less than that, we start to say, oh, keep an eye on it at least. Here's some things you can do. Talk to your kid, read books more, pretend to read books more with them. By the time they're 24 months, usually they're saying somewhere between 100 and 300. If they're not quite to that point, then we start to say, keep an eye on it or check in with your pediatrician. And really, if they're getting closer to 3 and they're really not talking, and that's when we would be like, probably need a referral to a speech pathologist. You might want to work with a birth to 3 program. If you catch it earlier, it's better. So really do want to keep track of those. If there are concerns, talk to your pediatrician. Don't just say like, oh, well, every kid is different. Like if you have suspicions that they might be low, it's important to get intervention. But don't freak out if you're like, well, my kid's talking less than the neighbor kid.
I know.
That's okay.
I will say that was probably me, but in some cases, especially I think in mom groups, and especially when you have all your kids around the same time, then there is my kid's not walking yet. And then you think and then you go and look at YouTube or something, and then sometimes you can feel a certain way, and I'm glad that we made that point, which is yes, there are cutoffs. I mean, and also a mother's instinct is a real thing too. So listen to your gut. And if you can always get a second opinion, talk to your pediatrician, and just know that language does develop. And we're very lucky because Zaza, we were able to get her ear tubes. But of course, with her being our first child, we had to go through a certain number of ear infections and medicine and everything until they said, oh, I think she might need ear tubes. Of course, with Charlie, he had just a very few before they said, oh, yeah, your first kid had ear tubes. Well, let's go ahead and get him ear tubes. And so it's been like night and day with his language development. And, so he was right on par for your study. And I know if Zaza had taken your study at that time, we would have definitely had to say, yes, she's had ear tubes. She's delayed.
And that's very common. Very common.
Sure.
Usually it's if you think about it, within a few months. So if you think your kid is delayed, if they're still feeling delayed in a couple months, if they're not to that point, then maybe check in.
And there's resources too that parents can go to that I don't remember the resource it was, but we did
Yeah.
do a resource that, the state provided to get them tested to see,
Yes.
because then the state does have resources for parents as well.
Yep. So don't freak out, but just keep an eye on it. And there's, especially at this age, especially for language, majority of those children are going to catch up by the time they get to kindergarten. So that's the good news, is that even if they're delayed, it's not hard to necessarily get them caught up. But you might want to talk to them a little more, read some more books, get a little more input going, and that can help sort of jumpstart it.
Yeah.
But only about maybe 10 to 20% of those children end up still being delayed.
Okay.
Especially if you do nothing and you're like, yeah, whatever, and don't try, then the kid will be more at risk for having a disorder later.
Okay. When we're talking about children, screen times, shows, so of course back in my day it was a little bit more Sesame Street, and let's see, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was also a favorite in our household. And now, of course, I didn't really know all the new shows. And when I went to your talk, it was like being at home, because you had a little video of Miss Rachel on, and so Miss Rachel is a very big deal, to say the least. But one thing that was interesting when you were doing your talk was that you said that with the video, there's not that interaction where they'll pause and wait for the child to respond, but it'll just go on, right?
Miss Rachel will be like, "Are you ready?" And then the kid might just sit there, and she's going to go on, regardless of what the kid says.
It's like a great facial expression, because she's very, she does all the facial expressions, and she's so popular. And when I was prepping for this podcast, interestingly enough, I asked my husband, Stephen, and he seems to think that actually maybe Zaza's speech might have improved after watching a little bit of Miss Rachel. And I think maybe part of it could be because, she does some dances, and I didn't realize even that nursery rhymes and certain things like that I guess it's like just repetition that really can help children with their language development. Is that right?
Yes.
Did I get right there?
Yeah. Nursery rhymes are great because they have that repetition, and they get those patterns, and they emphasize child-friendly words. They emphasize different sounds of the words, so they can be really beneficial for kids. It's a good use of, I guess, a recording or something like that.
So would you say, like, if a mom and dad are going to like sit down and read a book to their child, would you say variety is good? Or would you say, hey, like, try to read the same book over and over and over for a week if the kid can take it? Or what would you recommend?
I think there's some mixed evidence there. I mean, if you're reading, it's good.
Okay.
But some work has showed that repetition can be good, because kids aren't necessarily going to learn on the first pass. And so the more they get, the more. But if the kid is going to be bored with it and they don't want to read it, it's better to do something new that they can focus on. So if the kid is going to sit there and wants to read the same book, do it. Don't be like, oh, I'm bored of it. If the kid wants to read it again. They're going to take something because they're focused on it then too.
Okay.
And they're interested in it, and they're engaged. They're in the moment with it. So repetition is not bad when it comes to child development.
So I brought a few toys that I wanted to ask you about. I have one that I was just going to see. Is this, first of all, when you're shopping, everything is going to speak to you, and you're going to want to buy everything because of the marketing. And so this is an example of something that I found when I was just at the store, and it says, Mr. Pencil's Scribble, Write, and Read. And the question to you is, can you look at this and say, is this a good or is this a not good for, let's see, it says 3+ years, and it has it looks basically like a tablet for a child.
My first impression is looks like the only, I've never used this toy before, but
I've never used this toy either.
It looks like most of the interaction is all going to happen on the screen. Like, it's very much a computer based. So you hit these buttons, something comes up on the screen, you respond to the screen, maybe you tap the screen with this little pencil. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of creativity or anything beyond what's happening on the screen. Now, if this is going to be up above 3, we know that they can process from a screen a little bit better. But there's still not a lot you can do with this other than maybe spell a word. And so this probably isn't going to be adding It's going to be a lot of shiny, brights and flashing lights and colors. And so it's going to capture their attention. But if you think about being overstimulated with lots of things, that's not helpful necessarily for acquiring information either. Because you're like, ooh, shiny, cool. Oh, wait, what'd you say? And so my first hunch is, well, this might capture the kid's attention, and this might be a decent, like, okay, you need to stay busy for 5 minutes while I do something important. But I would not put money on them learning a ton from this. Because it'll be relatively limited to just what's on the screen and maybe more distracting based on the sounds and brights and flashing lights and things like that. And it looks like it's teaching them how to spell, which you can do with a pen and paper too.
True. Yeah.
So you may not need it.
Like Magnadoodle is, I mean, I love Magnadoodle. So yeah, that is one example. And then I'll bring out this. So this is my little HEB shopping basket. And this is literally just what happened to be there from, not all of this is from HEB, but like a little cup and then, corn, everything. So something like this would be good for like maybe pretend play or like people say pretend play. What is it?
Pretending? Well, so pretend play, we also call it sociodramatic play. Because you're having sort of mini dramas where you can act out, like, I'm going to cook dinner just like mommy does. So you're engaging in activities that are real life. Maybe teaching you about cooking a little bit. You're trying to remember, what did mom do in the kitchen last night? I'm going to do the same thing. So you're working on your memory. And there's also a creative element. So unlike the tablet, in this case, you can do multiple things. You don't just push buttons. You can hold this up. You can even stack your couple things and see, okay, look at that, it balances. And say, I'm going to pretend to eat it. Oh, wait, I'm going to pretend to drink this one. And so you can do lots of different things. And so the more creative you can be with the activities and with the objects, the more you can hands-on feel, the better it's going to be for learning. And so when we think about pretend play, we really think about creativity and engagement or sort of mini dramas. And a lot of times this is also going to be social, whereas it's socio-dramatic. That's where the social comes in. So you're interacting with someone else. And how many parents have a kid that will run up to them with fake food and be like, here you go. I made this for you. A little girl at the library came up to me last night and was like, just gave me a plastic cup. I'm like, oh, thank you. Tasty, right? And that's helping with the social skills, the interaction, the communication, the words, and all of that. So this is really creative. Even though you're like, well, they're not drawing anything, they're not producing something from thin air, they can do a lot with this.
Yeah, and this also would help with the words when they're holding it. And the little T-Rex arms.
It's up close and personal, right? They can really see.
They really feel the corn. Here we are, we're learning like about broccoli. I just love this. This is a great little basket that you can get at HEB. They have it in the little section, and it's a really fun. The kids love it,
and it matches with the real world too. So the things that they're playing with they're going to see in the real world too, and then they can draw those connections. So they're like, this is my basket, but mommy has a basket. When we're shopping, and then the more representations of objects you see, the better knowledge you have of that. So when you see corn in a plastic form, and you see corn chopped up, and you see corn, real corn on the cob, and then you see corn growing in the ground, you start to realize that corn is this whole category of things. And it comes in lots of different forms. And so these pretend things that map to the real world is just another representation of that, learning that holistic category.
That is so cool.
Variety is actually really good for that.
Yeah. That is so interesting. And I know when you talked about even with bananas, like that you can have green banana, yellow,
cartoon banana,
also an overripe banana too. And then like you said, like you can have it mashed, and there's so many different forms of a banana. And you did say the cartoon and the 2D, and then it's like just at some point it just all clicks, and then the kid gets it like, oh, banana.
Sort of. I mean, it's not an overnight, but it does happen pretty quickly. And it's usually within the first around 2 years old. And it actually has to do with their exposure to things and exposure to words. So as their vocabulary gets bigger, they start to realize there's patterns. So every time mom says ball, it's this round thing. Ball, and those are all round. Corn is this like oval shaped thing and it's yellow. Banana is this crescent shaped and it's yellow. Every time she says shoe, it's an oval with a hole. And they start to notice these patterns. And it turns out shape is an important feature.
Okay.
For most objects have a certain shape. Chairs have a certain shape to them. And so kids start picking up on that pattern. We're good at what we call statistical learning. You're not counting math or anything like that, but we pick up on patterns in the world, and we do as adults. Kids can start to do that by the time they're about 1, picking up on these patterns. If you think about the patterns of our language, the sounds that we hear over and over again, they start picking up on those patterns of words. A ball goes to a round thing. Corn goes to this hollow thing. Banana goes to this crescent yellow thing. Shape. The shape of something must be important. So when they hear a made-up word like whiff, they start paying attention to shape and the category of things. So it's about this pattern. And then by the time you get to be about 2, you start to, it clicks. It clicks in a way. And you start paying attention to certain features and learning how to group things by similarity and what features make something more or less similar. Things like color don't often matter. It doesn't matter what color cup is doesn't matter. The cups have to be cup-shaped. Yeah. Okay. And that's what's important.
It is just mind-boggling, the language development. I think it's so cool what you do. And I'm so appreciative of all the research you've done. What's next for you? And the research and you've learned a lot of things, but now what is the next level of what y'all are eager to learn at the Kids Lab?
We really want to better understand some of this technology that we don't understand yet. So we really don't have a good understanding of something like educational media. There actually is no or very minimal federal regulations for what gets called educational. So you go on YouTube, you'll find lots of things that call educational. The publisher got to decide what they called educational, and they had to maybe make one statement of we have the ABCs in here.
Oh, wow.
That's what we'll call it. And so we don't actually know what features help. For instance, there are some programs. One is called Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media does a really thorough, good job of labeling different videos for content and what might be good and what might be bad. But we still don't have a good idea of what information or how to present it. So that's one area we're going to be looking in. That we want to do a lot more research. We want parents to report the types of things that their kids are doing and also report their child's development so we can look at the correlations there. We want to do more work on things like smartphones and background media that's going to be present throughout our life and see what kind of impact that has. And we're starting to look at things like how using a computer in elementary school. Almost every single elementary school kid is using a computer these days. And how is that then changing their learning in ways that we learned very differently when we were in elementary school? And so we're sort of taking this angle of media as a part of our world in much the same way as toys are and cars are and clothing and everything else. And but we haven't measured it.
Okay.
And so we can't give a number. Okay. Because we don't know enough yet. And so that's really what our next endeavor is try to figure out what works and what doesn't, and then tell parents and translate that. So we can all be on the same page about supporting our children's development.
And what about AI?
That's a whole beast.
That's an episode maybe. I don't know.
We don't know. AI is progressing much faster than any of the research is. So there's some uses of AI that can be really helpful for spurring creativity and get us thinking about new avenues. You can use AI for kids interactions. So you can have a robot give a real-time back and forth. And you can have a AI generated person that's responding to a kid. So you get the back and forth. But it's still not real, right? And it still doesn't have some of the same qualities as humans do. But yeah, we don't know a whole lot. we don't know a lot for adults, let alone for kids.
Sure. So I'm intrigued by what you said about the common sense media. Is when parents are looking and knowing that, okay, I do need to give my kid a screen. I want to give the kid the richest screen, if you will, and not do something, that's overstimulating. Where do they turn to look for that?
There's not a great places right now because there's not enough research on what counts as educational. Common Sense Media is probably the easiest, and that's a website you can access. A lot of their content is free currently, where you can look up specific videos or specific shows, and it will give you a rating of the different themes. So they break it down in terms of, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much violence is there, or how much negative messaging is there, and how much positive messaging. 1 to 5, how many role models are there? 1 to 5, how many like social skills are being promoted? And so then you can make a judgment.
Is that for movies, or is that for anything? Like, even is Miss Rachel on that or not?
Miss Rachel is not yet, actually, because she's so new. She hasn't been cataloged yet. But it includes movies. A lot of movies, at least as long as they're about a year old, they're usually on there.
Okay.
A lot of YouTube videos are on there. A lot of TV shows are on there. Not everything, though. But that can give you some guidelines for the types of things that to be looking for. And in general, if we want a narrative, that's a big thing to look for, is in these TV shows and programs. If there's a narrative, if there's a story that's being told, that is much more beneficial, and kids can actually engage with that and be thinking. And turns out kids will start thinking creatively. And then at the end of the show, they might go play pretend because they were tracking it. Ones that don't have a narrative, that are just like, boop, 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 here, like Coco Melon is all over the place, lights and flashing and things change really quickly. That's going to keep kids' attention, but they're not going to learn a thing because they're just always overstimulated. Right. But if it's a continual narrative, that's going to keep their attention, but not be overstimulating.
And then I feel like it was at your talk, but it was like, once someone is overstimulated, then that there is like a new baseline. Is that right? And then you have to be overstimulated more next time, or is
it can keep building on each other.
Okay.
Right. And so we know that children who do lots and lots of media, especially the high intensity media early on, tend to have more impulse control issues later on. And so they have a harder time attending and focusing because their baseline has been moved up. And so thinking that's a good case where you might want to set boundaries. So if you know your kid's getting overstimulated, you're like, all right, we're going to turn this off in 3 minutes. Okay, we're going to turn it off in 2 minutes, and hold your ground. And be like, this is the end of this, because you have to sort of break that cycle and wean. And it's going to take time, for sure. But then sort of, or if your kid is already overstimulated, then sort of wean it down. Be like, okay, the next day we have 1 minute less. And the next day we have 1 minute less. And so you can sort of move it back down.
And how do you know if your kid is overstimulated?
I mean, most parents will know their kids best, but usually if taking away the stimulating thing creates an entire meltdown, that's when you know that, like, okay, this is too overstimulating. It's normal for you to if you take a toy away and the kid be like, no, that's normal.
Yeah, like the remote control for Charlie gets very upset. Yeah.
But if after 5 minutes or so they can't re-engage with something else, then you may want to be addressing that. And again, I would encourage parents to speak to pediatricians. You can even put them in touch with professionals that can help with some of that training and stuff if you need to.
Okay. I've learned so much today. I learn so much every time I talk to you. I feel smarter every time I talk to you. So I know I got a lot out of this. Thank you so much.
These are
for
great
your
questions.
Time.
Get me thinking about
I have a ton more, so we'll definitely have to do another episode. And thank you for coming today and joining us. And thank y'all for joining us as well. And we will be very mindful of our screen time. But of course, we are parents. You know, we gotta. We'll just have to keep it real.